Happy March 1st and welcome to 19 to 40. Over the next 19 days leading up to my 40th birthday, which is March 19th, I am going to be sharing one lesson that I've learned in my almost 4 decades that have contributed to the well-rounded, self-actualized, happy, healthy, thriving, and surviving person that I consider myself to be. Just keep in mind that the only constant in life is growth and change. So even though I consider myself to be self-aware and self-actualized, there is always work to be done on self. Self-actualization is like an infinity project, right? Just wanted to say that. So lesson number 1, the definition of emotions or emotional or being emotional is not tears or the act of crying. The quickest way to offend me as a child through early adulthood was to call me emotional, right? And it's a whole trauma thing. We won't get into it. But for me, calling me emotional equated me to being weak or like a crybaby. And in my mind, I would be like, you must not know me. You must not know where I'm from or what I've gone through. You wouldn't call me emotional, aka weak, if you knew my story, right? Which we'll get to defining yourself by your circumstances in a later video in the series. This is also why I had such a hard time getting into like astrology and things like that because of the way people would define Pisces. Oh, you're so emotional and all of these things. I'm like, that's not me at all. Like that doesn't define who I am at all. I'm on the cusp. My birthday is March 19th. Aries is like the next day. Maybe there's something to it because I'm not emotional. But through a lot of self-work, self-reflection, and therapy, because honey, I'm going to only do so much DIY, like self-improvement. I need professionals. I was able to redefine what emotional meant, or just look at emotions and being emotional in its like totality. And I was like, oh. So what do I mean? Growing up, I was such a hothead. I stayed in physical conflict, verbal conflict. And if I wasn't in some sort of like physical or verbal conflict, especially after my mom passed away, and especially in high school and a little bit through college, I ain't gonna lie. Like I was so quick to anger. I was so quick to act off of that anger. And it never registered in my mind that when people call me emotional, that's what they were referring to, the anger. I'm mad, but I ain't crying. So why are you calling me emotional? Anger is an emotion, especially when you react or act off of it almost instantaneously. It was bad. Also, I've always just been a very passionate person, which I didn't equate to emotions either. And sometimes I could be so passionate about something, like the way that I talk about it, the way that I present it, even the way that I consume it, right, it could be intense. One specific instance that I can remember, and the reason why this came up in therapy is because we were talking about my dad, which is a whole other point we'll get to somewhere in the series. I was a senior in high school, and we were doing Black History presentations in my English class. And we could just go up one after the other. She didn't have like a specific way that we had to go up. It wasn't by like last name or whatever. Just whoever wanted to go next could go next. So I was really excited about my presentation, very passionate about my presentation. So I get up, I go into the start going to the front of the class, and it was another girl in my classroom that just like zipped in front of me and got up and just started presenting. And I was so annoyed in that moment that I went the F off, right? And so my teacher called me outside of the classroom or whatever. She was like, you're always getting so emotional. Like, it's good that you're passionate about what you're doing, but you're disrupting the class. And in my mind, I'm immediately offended because I'm like, I'm not emotional. It's the principal. I was already en route to the front of the class to do my thing. Yes, I'm passionate about the thing, but I'm upset over the principle of the fact that you didn't make her go sit down. Like, now I'm outside of the classroom. So I ended up having to like return with a parent because I went the fuck off. Like, I was so mad. And my therapist very kindly said 1 + 1 is 2, and you're emotional, but that's okay. We're going to learn how to regulate them. So one of my biggest self-realizations or actualizations is that, girl, you are emotional. I am very, very emotional. And that includes being a crybaby. I didn't cry because I wouldn't allow myself to cry because it made me feel weak. I would even go as far as to say one of the biggest markers of my personality is how passionate, right, that I am about people and places and things that I love. And what allowing myself to embrace this characteristic, it is what it is. I've learned how to regulate them, and I get better and better at it as I get older. Because here's the thing, I'm still a hothead. I'm a kind person, not a very nice person. That's another point we'll get into later on in the series. I still don't play no games about people playing in my face. And I have to be very intentional about my reaction to disrespect or just unappealing behavior towards me and other people in general. I have to really be like, okay, Angela, pull it back. It also really opened me up to tapping into like being a more affectionate and compassionate like person in relationships. I'm still working on it, to be quite honest. That one is still a little hard for me, especially romantically. It's been a little easier in like familial relationships and friendships. Romantic relationships, it's a little harder. Also, I've been single for 8 years, so I literally haven't had the opportunity to put any of this into practice in a romantic way. But I've always been a very like affectionate person, you know, compassionate, passion. We talked about passion, but passionate passion. And I always held back, especially in romantic relationships, even in friendships and in familial relationships where my family and friends will be like, you know, I don't really know anything about you. Can I have a hug? A handshake? So yeah, getting in touch with my full range of emotions and identifying it as such has been a game changer for me as a almost 40-year-old woman. It's March 2nd and day 2 of 19 to 40, where I give you 19 lessons I've learned in my almost 4 decades before my 40th birthday, which is on March 19th. Today's lesson is not defining who I am by my circumstances. I think the question of like, tell me about yourself is like kind of paralyzing for a lot of people. I'll even jump off the ledge and say most people, especially if it's like an off the cuff question you don't necessarily, or you didn't necessarily get to prepare and answer for it. I think that's a hard question to answer for most people. And I'm saying this as someone who has a bachelor's in speech, and I have worked upwards of 15 years in corporate training, so adult learning and instructional design. So I literally get paid to talk in front of people. I'm saying answering that question is even hard for me when I don't have a chance to prepare for it, even today. But the way that I define myself is a lot different than how I used to. So when I say I stopped defining myself by my circumstances, that's exactly what I mean. So when I was younger and people would ask me, or they would say, tell me about yourself, I would list off a bunch of things that happened to me that I didn't have any control over. So it'd be things like, I grew up in the projects. I literally left the projects and went to college. I lived in the projects all my life. My mom was murdered when I was 13. We were poor. My dad was absent. Like all of these things that, again, were out of my control and that happened to me. And they are a part of my story. They do play a big part in what makes me who I am, but it's not necessarily who I am. And the reason I felt like I needed to start defining myself differently, because I would find myself getting annoyed when people would feel sorry for me. I would sort of like poo-poo it off. One, because I don't like being the center of attention like that, and I don't like people feeling sorry for me. And I don't like people seeing me as some like helpless person. So I would just like poo-poo it off and be like, oh, it's fine. You know, I got out, I went to college, I da-da-da-da, all of these things. But I really sat down and was like, okay, I have to find another way to define myself, because those things are things that happen to me and they aren't me. And I realized that I don't like the responses or the reactions that definition of me gets from people, if that makes sense. And it's not like I'm ashamed of it, right? we'll get to that part of the conversation, especially if this is some sort of like friendship or something like that. You know, we'll get to the part where we talk about like childhood and stuff like that. But right off top, I want to define myself by what you can experience by being in community with me. So now when I'm answering the question of who are you or tell me about yourself, I tend to leave out details about my upbringing or my, circumstances as a child. I don't even go into like my education or my like professional background right off the top. I usually start to define myself or describe myself to people by my personality trait and my personality traits and some of my like fun, quirky characteristics, right? I'm an extremely passionate person. I am passionate about the people and places and things that I love. I'm an extrovert. I am extremely outgoing. I'm a conversationalist. I love long, deep, and even not so deep conversations. I love a silly conversation about absolutely nothing as well. I'm funny and I'm a storyteller, and those things go hand in hand. I love to tell a story. I'm very dramatic. I'm very like over the top. And the reason I say that it goes hand in hand with being funny, because people are always like slapping their knee laughing, and I can be like dead serious. So for me, I've deduced that I'm a funny person. I'm very matter of fact. I'll tell you a joke, but I'll never tell you a lie. I'm a kind person. I'll always approach you, even in conflict, with loving kindness. It may not be what you want to hear, but it'll be said with love. I am a safe space. I tend to be that friend, that person that people can come to and you can tell me whatever without judgment. So those are some of the things that I will say off the cuff. If I have time to be a little more eloquent with my response about who I am or tell me about yourself, then I will. I'll write something a little more eloquent, But if I have to come off the cuff, it's usually those things that I tell people. And I found that that is a much better description of who I am as a person and how people experience me than telling people all of the hardship I had to overcome first and then eventually getting to who you see today. It's March 3rd and day 3 of 19 to 40, where I spend the next 19 days leading up to my 40th birthday on March 19th, telling you one lesson that I've learned in my almost 4 decades that has contributed to the person that you are seeing today. Today, we're going to actually knock 2 out. So we're going to knock lesson 3 and 4 out today, because I realized I'll be on a little mini vacation the weekend that precedes my birthday. And I ain't gonna be out here posting about no lessons learned. I'm gonna be giving y'all outfits and food and drinks, okay? So lesson 3 is I'm a kind person, not a nice person, and that's okay. Besides the fact that I'm very much a 3-2-1, 1-2-3, what the heck is bothering me type person in a situation where I am upset, meaning I literally have to talk myself down. I am a hothead by nature. All of my kumbaya-ness is a learned behavior. They're learned behaviors by nature. I am a firecracker. Besides that, because that's the easiest to control, because girl, you will go to jail if you put your hands on people. That's enough. That's enough to have me going 3-2-1, 1-2-3 instead of reacting in the way that I would when I was younger. I think where the biggest issue came in for me is that I also happen to be a very matter-of-fact person. Like, I'll tell you a joke, but I'll never tell you a lie, right? I will fight for your right to be wrong, but I'm still tell you that you're wrong, if that makes sense. And so people have a really hard time with the truth, right? It comes off as rude, as not nice, right? So that's why I say I'm not a nice person, because people don't respond well to things that they don't want to hear. Even in that, I am a kind person, right? I am considerate. I try to be thoughtful, even in critique, even if I'm like calling someone in. I'm respectful. I'm empathetic. I try to always lead with grace and love. But like so many people, and leading into lesson number 4, I had to learn the difference between like being matter of fact or keeping it real and keeping it real rude, right? So I had to learn that I could tell the truth. I could be honest. I could give a critique or an opinion without just blurting out responses and critiques and difficult conversations without thinking about how the other person is going to receive it. And again, that's out of your control. They still can receive it completely different than you meant it, but at least putting the effort behind making sure that it is it's constructive feedback for the person. I try to always be kind, but I might not always be nice, right? And I'll give another example. If I'm in a restaurant and my food is incorrect, or I don't like my food, or if I'm somewhere and I'm getting some sort of service, getting my nails done, getting my hair done, whatever, and I am not pleased with the service, I am not, at this big old age, walking out of the nail salon or the hair salon or just eating the food at the restaurant to be nice, to spare the service provider's feelings. That's just wasting money, right? Nice people would do that. A kind person would respectfully say, I'm not enjoying this food. I don't necessarily like my nails. Can we, do something different? I'm not really happy with my hair. That's what a kind person would do. Sometimes I just feel like people are nice at their own expense or at the expense of others. Niceness is politeness, right? Like if she's happy with it, then let her be happy with it. That sounds like something a nice person would say. But kindness is care. And that's the difference between being nice and being kind, according to Angela. It's March 4th and day 4 of 19 to 40, a series I've been doing leading up to my 40th birthday on March 19th, where I share 19 lessons that I've learned in my almost 4 decades that have molded me into the person that I am today. Today is going to be another twofer, so I'm going to share lesson 5 and 6. Lesson number 5 is disassociation is not conflict resolution. I've already said in previous videos in this series that I am by nature just a hothead. I'm impatient. I get irritated easily. I get frustrated easily, especially if I know that somebody is like playing in my face. That's Chicago. I joke on here all the time that I have one back and 1/4 in me. I'm telling you a joke, but I'm also not telling you a lie. I cannot stand the act of arguing. So when I was younger, like if someone would be like arguing back and forth with me, I would get extremely frustrated because I don't argue. And if I asked you to stop talking to me, which was like my go-to, I would just be like, stop talking to me. And you continue to talk to me. And that was a terrible habit to have. One, because you can't just be putting your hands on people. But two, I spent a lot of days out of school returning with the parent because my conflict resolution style was to get active. Right? But as I got older, moving into college, moving into early adulthood, I obviously couldn't continue to behave that way. And because I had not yet found therapy, I was doing what I like to call DIY self-improvement. So I started to lean more into like disassociation. I just told myself, if I just don't talk about it, if somebody upsets me or they make me mad or they do something I don't like, I could just cut them off. I can just shut down. I can just remove the opportunity for the conversation in general. And I think also, I know that I used to conflate conflict and difficult conversations as the same thing. And because, in my opinion, having difficult conversations is a learned behavior. Like you have to actively practice and figure out how you engage in conflict, how you fight, right? And I don't think people take a lot of time to hone in what that looks like for them. So for me, difficult conversations just still felt like arguing. It still felt like I was being attacked. Even when it was somebody that I loved and that I know loved me back and they were just trying to express their feelings, I would literally shut down. I didn't want to hear it. You would be talking to me and I would be like, because without my added response, which was probably going to be something the person didn't want to hear, right? It diffuses that flame. To give you an example, there was a time in my last relationship where my ex-boyfriend or boyfriend at the time had done something or not done something. I can't quite remember what the conflict was actually about, because lesson number 6, people are not mind readers, and you have to tell them your needs and wants and desires and expectations. And it was an issue where he didn't do something that I felt like he should have just known was something that he should do, right? Like, you're this age, like at this age, you should just know that that is a need, an expectation of a woman. And so I very obviously had an attitude, but I was trying to avoid conflict. So I just like disassociated from him and from the situation. And I just, was kind of moving about the house with a little bit of a toot on my shoulder. And for me, he took too long to ask me what was wrong. So when he finally came to me and was like, you seem like you're upset. I don't know what I did. What are you upset about? And I was like, oh, you missed your window of opportunity. Like you can no longer talk to me about that. I've been mad for 48 hours. Your window of opportunity to have a conversation about what's wrong with me is done. It's a dead issue. But to me at that time, it made sense because I was very much upset, and I was very much at a point in my upsetness that I could like blow my top if he said the wrong thing. And what I was trying to avoid at that time in my life in conflict is getting so mad that I cannot like bring myself down. Because one thing about me, once I'm up, I'm stuck. No Cardi B. So when I first started therapy, like my first order of business with my therapist was to get me to a place where I could have healthy disagreements with the people that I love. Because I didn't want to keep going through my life cutting off the people that I love because they pissed me off. Don't get me wrong, for situations that are dead, because some situations just are dead, I'm a huge advocate of leaving them where they had you messed up at. That includes family, whoever. But for me, relationships with my sisters, with certain friends, romantic relationships, whatever, people that I loved and I wanted to maintain relationship with them, I needed to know how to have difficult conversations, learn my fighting style, right? Be aware of like my triggers so that I could communicate those in relationships, and I can recognize when those boundaries are being crossed and like move around the situation if I need to. And truth moment, this is something that I have to continually work on. A few years ago, I actually sought out a new therapist for this exact thing because I thought I was fixed. I thought I had it under control. And then I went on a family vacation and my sister and I got into a fight. And when I tell you it got nasty, like me and my sisters have fought. I mean, we're sisters. But the way that I got out of body in that situation, once like I got home and, all of the adrenaline had come down, I was so embarrassed by myself because I just knew I was so above that. I have this rule where like, if somebody can get me to a place where I am out of my character, out of body, like just clowning and screaming and hollering, then that's one of those dead situations. Now that's a little different because that's my sister and I love my sister. And so like, it'll never be a dead situation for me. So I had to go back to therapy and figure out what triggered that response in me. And we figured it out. I'm not telling y'all. But the moral of that story is that it's something that you will have to continue to work on if you want to be good at conflict resolution and having difficult conversation with the people that you love and care about continuing relationship with. It's March 5th and day 5 of 19 to 40, where I have been sharing lessons that I've learned during my almost 4 decades leading up to my 40th birthday on March 19th. Even though it's the 5th day, we're actually on lesson number 7. And that is, no is a complete sentence. Being able to say no, full stop, no caveats, no, I'll think about it, no, let me get back to you, no, I can't, because I can, I just don't want to. No, period, is a superhuman trait. Like, it's a superhuman strength. But I think it's necessary to exercise. I read somewhere before where It said, if you don't know how to say no, or if you never say no, I'm paraphrasing, your yeses start to mean nothing. They don't mean anything. If there is someone that you are in relationship with, it could be romantic, it could be familial, it could be a friendship, it could be a co-working relationship. If there is someone or something that you always say yes to, even when you don't want to, even when it is so obviously an inconvenience to you, the person on the other end of that is going to get used to only ever hearing yes. So the first time you say no, what Beyonce said, it's like you never said yes. And your yeses have no value to them because they feel entitled to them. For me, one of the top two, and maybe not even number two, maybe number two, behind being embarrassed. I hate being embarrassed. But I absolutely hate feeling like I am doing something out of obligation, doing something that I don't want to do, doing something to try to appease someone, because if I say no, then they'll have an attitude. Not only do I not like how it makes me feel, I can't hide the fact that I am not having a good time doing it. So for me, my best bet was to learn how to say no, period. And that isn't something that I've always done. I have notoriously been the friend that is always going to show up, even when I didn't want to show up, even when I didn't have the capacity to show up. And I'm still like that. I'm still that friend. But when I feel compelled to say no because I don't want to, I just say no. On the flip side of that, learning how to say no and just being intentional with saying, I'm not interested in doing that, has, I wouldn't necessarily say saved friendships, but it has addressed some of the, I would say, complaints that my friends would have about me. Because there have been times where I didn't want to do something, or I didn't feel like doing something, and I didn't have the heart to say no. I would just be like, oh, I'll get back to you. I'll let you know later. And then just, never let them know. Or never follow up, right? Because I really didn't want to do it. I think it was Shonda Rhimes. She was doing like an interview with Oprah, and she was talking about how being able to say, no, I can't do that for you, or no, it was liberating for her. And it is an act of liberation to not put yourself in a position to do things that you just simply don't want to do. I don't necessarily think that no, period, as a complete sentence is like a one size fits all. Like, I have a 10-year-old niece. When I tell her no, I have to explain to her why I'm telling her no. For me, it's important to not just tell her no, especially when it's something that she wants to do. I don't want to just be like, no, period, and then take away her agency around said thing. Or in romantic relationships, where you and your partner have a collective goal, and sometimes your no is going to require some explanation. I have siblings, I have older nieces and nephews. I even have friends that if I feel compelled to tell them no to something that they are asking of me or from me, then I'll give an explanation. I'm not a complete biatch, and this isn't a like boundary thing, because I feel like, people misuse the idea of setting boundaries just to sort of like be dismissive, disassociate, cut people off. That's not what this is. But it really is liberating to be able to simply say, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to do that. No, thank you. And not feel like you always have to offer an explanation for why you're just simply not interested.